Welcome, soul driven writers, to the Soul Writer Podcast. This podcast is designed for writers like you who have a burning desire to share their story and message with the world and make the biggest impact possible. I'm your host, Lauren Eckhardt, bestselling author, ghostwriter, book coach, and the CEO of Burning Soul Collective. Here at the Soul Writer Podcast, we believe in the power of vulnerability and authenticity. Our mission is to inspire and empower you to write from the depths of your soul by showcasing other authors who have done exactly that. Through their journeys, you'll discover what it takes to write a book that truly resonates with readers and learn how you can embrace your own unique voice to live the writer's life that you've always imagined. So, gather your favorite writing tools, cozy up in your favorite spot, and let's explore the world of soul-driven writing together. This is the Soul Writer Podcast, where your passion meets purpose and the world awaits the magic that only you can create. Welcome to the journey. Welcome back to the Soul Writer Podcast. In today's episode, I interview Nita Kennedy. Nita is the author of Walk With Me, A Journey Through Motherhood and Path to Leadership. Outside of being an author, she is also a consultant and retired corporate leader. She bridges her writing and love of photography through her passion initiative of Walk With Me as well. It's her mission to empower people through sharing her experience, strength, and hope. In today's episode, Nita and I talk about how she wrote the very first draft of her book by hand, which is unheard of these days, but also what it was like to know that her story really fit a gap in the market, one that she could come in and fill because it was a bridge of her own personal experiences. And then we'll also talk about what it's like to really have to choose a target audience for your book, but to trust that your book will still be able to reach people even outside of that target audience. Nita, thank you so much for joining us today for the Soul Writer podcast. From the first time we met, you became just one of my favorite people in this world, and you're just so inspiring to me. Being able to work next to you too, especially as you put your story out into the world. So I love having you on today to talk about your book and your journey to writing this book and everything that you've done since it's been out. So thank you for being on this today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Let's dive on in then. How long has it been since your book has been out?
So 7 months, only 7 months. Wow. 7 months. I'm a journaler and I've journaled since fourth grade is the earliest one I remember doing and still have. Um, so I think it was always one of those things that writing was a way for me to express myself. And I feel like there was mountains and mountains to write about when there was a struggle in my life, right? And then there'd be like everything was good, you could tell, because there'd be nothing in my journals because
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
yeah, it's just it was therapeutic for me to get those feelings out uh, that didn't feel that I could share with anyone else. So I think in my career, 32 years with the same company and moving up through the ranks in that company, I mentored a lot of people, men and women, and they would always say, "You need to write a book," and it became a life of its own almost because people would say it to me, and I'm like, "Yeah, someday I will." And as I got closer to retirement, people would say, "What are you going to do? You're always going 100 miles an hour. How are you not going to do anything?" And I would say, "Maybe I'll write a book." And uh, then it all of a sudden, boom! It's 32 years. I'm retired and retired on January, I think it was the 3rd, one of those funky dates, right, of 2022. And January 5th, I'm like, okay, now what? And then trying to put, what kind of book do I want to write?
People were first talking about, like, Nita, you should write a book. Did you have an idea in your mind of what kind of book it would be? Or was it just kind of, yeah, a book is there? Or did you have some clarity at the time?
I think I had some clarity in the sense that my experiences, my strength, and my hope was something that I could share with people. So I knew that's what it was going to be. I just didn't know how it was going to come out. That was the hard part for me. And I actually took a 1 month online writing class and to try to get my thoughts together. And that really helped me to form an outline. And then I met you, and then took it from there. But the best part about it for me was we were sitting outside. We live in Arizona. Can we sit outside 12 months out of the year?
Like
So we were
you.
sitting outside in January, and I was talking to my husband, and um, he said, "Well, books all the time about leadership. Can read those all the time, and then you also see books about parenting, but you never see a book that comes together." And I thought, you know what? That's a really great way to put it. So there's a lot of things within my leadership that comes from my parenting, and there's a lot of my parenting that comes from my leadership. So to put those 9 lessons together and pull from both aspects of my life, I hear many women say, I've never seen anything like that before.
Love that it came from your husband, that he identified that gap for you. Like, I think that's the coolest thing, like his contribution to the book. And that would be,
Yeah.
but it's a great point. It's those times that we can pause and realize, okay, there's actually a gap here and something that is meaningful to me. Like, it's a book that I would want to read about because of that bridge in my own life between leadership
Mhm.
and parenting. And so I love that you were able to come in and feel that just so naturally, right? It's not like you heard that potentially there's a gap, so I'm just going to write something that kind of fits in there. But it was so much about who you are as it was
Mhm.
that it just clicked, which I think is pretty cool. So, on that note, the book to fill this gap is called,
Walk with me.
it's got a killer cover. Yes, thank you. Actually, I have my copy right here too. It's always right next to me. I think it's one of the coolest covers, and it's so fitting to who you are as well, uh, which we can talk about more here in a bit. But tell everyone what your book is actually about.
So the book is, just as I mentioned, it's 9 lessons that I've learned throughout my life, and how I learned those lessons and how I took those lessons forward, both in my parenting and in my leadership role. More importantly, the design of the book, I feel, is important, uh, because it has journaling pages in the back, and there's questions at the end of each chapter. I really wanted my story to become the reader's story as well, something that they could go back to. And I hear it over and over from people who have read the book, uh, that, oh, I can't share my copy, so I need to buy another one because
Oh,
I made notes. And I love that. I just love that. And that was the point.
yeah. How did you come up with those 9 lessons? Because it's such a unique number. My favorite number, ironically. But how did you really figure out, like, these are my 9 lessons that I want to share? Because I feel like that would almost be a hard part, right? Like, of all of your wisdom in the world, how do you narrow it down to 9 concepts?
And literally just started writing down the top ones.
Mhm.
And once I got past 9, I realized that the stories I was thinking about sharing related back to patience, or related back to humor, or they related back to tenacity, inner strength, leadership versus management. So I felt like I actually think I started with 11 and it ended up shortening it down to the 9. So those were the ones that just kept coming back and into my mind as I was thinking about stories to share.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's one that you just hold near and dear to your heart above all the rest, or is it truly? I
It
like your
would be hope.
reaction to that.
Yeah, it would, because each one is so important, but it would be hope. Uh, Ending the book with hope, uh, to me, was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And as you know, as you're my publisher, uh, the submitting the manuscript to you before writing the chapter, because I really wanted it to be perfect. And then literally a week later being diagnosed with cancer. And it's one of those, you're like, okay, so I guess that's one way for me to finish this chapter, or the book. It wasn't, and the chapter wasn't about that. It was just about everything we go through. There's always hope. And it might not look like a bright, shiny light right now. It might just be that little pinprick that you can barely see, but hope is always there. And as I say in the book, hope is a gift that you give yourself.
Mm,
And so it really just exemplified that for me, going through the cancer treatments and stuff.
yeah. I don't want to scare anyone too from writing a book, but I have to say, like, continually, time and time again, it's been one of the most incredible parts to watch of a book writing process. And I always warn people with a disclaimer now before we start in on a project, because it's truly like you committing to do this. It's almost like the world is really going to challenge you on every concept that you're putting into your book and test you, like, how much do you truly believe this, and is this really a message that you believe in putting out there? And I've seen it happen so many times with my clients, and it's amazing how it strengthens them too with the message that they're delivering, because it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've been tested on this again and I still believe it, and it's why it's so important for so many other people to read this and hopefully have it sink into them as well.
Yeah.
So I just think that's an incredible part of the journey itself. I've referenced a few times already. People have come back and have told me this and have told me this, and I think that's beautiful. I want to explore that a little bit more, like the feedback that you've gotten in this post-publishing world. What has it been like?
Absolutely amazing. And I love when I do a speaking engagement and people will come up and say, I need to have two of these books. And I need one for my daughter. I loved that the last speaking engagement I had, the audience was probably 50-50 male, female. And, the cover, I hear a lot, oh, this is for women. And I say, no, it isn't. I worked in a very male dominated industry for 32 years and hired and mentored many men. Uh, But I'm a shoe person and it's my book.
Yes.
Yes. But what I love the most with the last speaking engagement, at the end of it, we always open it up to questions. And a young man, he was probably, I would say, maybe mid-20s, early 30s, somewhere right in there. And he said, at first I thought this book isn't for me. It's, based for women. And he said, so I read during our lunch break, I read the first two chapters. And he said, it's all the way for me. It's all the way for me. And so it's those things that excite me the most. I love women when they come to me and they say, I have to buy more copies, or I've made notes in this book, so I can't share it. But when you see a man make that move, right, and then come up to me and say, will you personalize this to my daughter or for my wife? Those things are huge to me. They're just huge to me.
Oh, that is beautiful. That speaks volumes too, and I think it's so important to talk about that in terms of, like, in the very beginning when we were talking about, like, who is this book for? What was your response to that?
I think at first, I really wanted it to be for women because I feel like, again, coming from a male-dominated business industry, a lot of women don't feel like they have a voice. And I wanted to give them that voice. And I wanted to give it to them through my experience, strength, and hope. And I still feel very strongly about that. But I still feel that the story is for everyone, for absolutely everyone. My sons have all read the book now. So, yes. So all my daughters and my daughter-in-laws and my granddaughters, for that matter, the older ones, have read the book. They read it right away. Now, my sons, on the other hand, did not. So within the last 30 days, I am not even exaggerating, they have texted me and said, I read your book and I'm so proud of you. And it's amazing to see this from your aspect. One of my sons just took on a huge supervisory position with a company he's been with for about 10 years. And so he walked in like a wrecking ball to his new team. And I said, I wrote this book. And there's a chapter on management versus leadership. And if you could just read that one chapter and then we'll talk about how you came in like a wrecking ball in your first week with your new team. And we talked 2 days later and he was like, I can't believe how much we're alike, which again, it's shared experiences, not because he's my son. It's because we all feel that way when we take on a new role. Okay, so I'm going to come in and make all this happen and you scare people. And so, it's that managers manage and leaders lead. And so he got that lesson right away. But it was fun to me when I could say to him, hey, you know what? I wrote this book.
Yep.
You should read
Which
that.
chapter would really apply to your current life situation?
I had one of my sons say to me, So when you do this speaking stuff, Mom, what do you talk about? Like leadership and motherhood? And I'm like, yeah, I wrote a book. You should read it.
So 6 months after the fact, they finally read it.
I wrote.
Two things I want to say about that. Like, number one, I mean, with the target audience, sometimes it can be hard to like pick a target audience because you're like, again, these stories can apply to everyone because we come together on those shared experiences, like you said, shared experiences, shared emotions, uh, and that's how we all bond, no matter who you are, right? Uh, but no matter what, like you're still able to reach people even outside that target audience. I think it's powerful and always something to remember. The other part that I love that you brought up, because I hear this as almost discouragement for some authors once they put out their book. It's just like, great, like they're really excited that they're hearing from so many people that they've never met before. But they're like, my parents still haven't read it, or cousin still hasn't read it. And I love this point because it's like, just because they didn't read it right away doesn't mean that they will never read it. It has to still be in their own time too, versus forcing them to read it early on if they're not ready to
Yeah.
receive the message that you hope everyone receives from reading it, not just reading it to support you. They're good, right? But
Yes.
to be able to read it in the time that they need the message from it, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the design too before with the journal entries. Let's go ahead real fast and talk because I do love it. Like I'm obsessed with this cover. How did you decide to take all of your stories and end up with like this to represent you and the title for that matter? I really want to talk about the title as well.
So I'll talk about the title first because I remember when you agreed to take me on as a project, and I kept saying I don't have a title, I don't have a title, and I can't think of anything. And you said just write. Don't worry about that. Just write. And I probably got into chapter 3 maybe, and I was like, one of the things that I always said, and I'll back up and say in my position, it was a lot of helping people move on to the next phase in their lives. So a spouse or a partner had died, uh, and I was helping them navigate through estates and a lot of information. And there was always a well meaning family member that would come with the widow or widower or the business partner. And I was never comfortable releasing all the information in front of the well meaning relative. And so I would look at the person who was my client and I would say, why don't we take a walk? And we would go for a walk. And I would then give them the information, would tell them why I was doing that because I appreciated or respected their privacy, quite frankly. They're missing a word that I want to say, but their right to privacy. That's what I was trying to say. And they all appreciated that. No one ever said, they would say, well, I trust my son, or those things would happen, but they appreciated the fact. And so as I was writing the book and getting into that second, third chapter, it hit me. Walk with me is who I am. Yes. And it became the title. I think the subtitle we messed with a little bit. I wanted the subtitle to reflect, again, those two parts of my life, right? So people didn't think it was just about motherhood or just about leadership. Right. And so we come up with that. And the book jacket, that was fun. Because remember, at that point, I was going through radiation. And so I was super tired. I didn't feel really well. And I would throw this idea at you. And I love your faces because you would go, And so whenever I heard you say, I knew that, yeah, okay, maybe I need to think about that some more. And so we actually had a completely different cover, remember? And I texted you, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I said, I'm done. I hate it. I don't want to do this. And we started talking about who am I and what represents me. And I am that person that owned 100 pairs of shoes that were on display in their own closet. I got dressed first with my shoes and worked my way up. And so it just became, again, representing me, not just the idea of me, but the actual me.
Yes. Yes. And that's what I think feels so good about your book, like, especially when someone knows you too on top of it, is you just feel like it's you inside and out. It just feels so authentic and so genuine in everything that you stand for, which I think is exactly what many people should want to be able to achieve with their book and hold it and have it feel like it's truly an extension of them. And for other people
Mhm.
to see it and be like, that's Nita. That's for sure Nita, which I think is really amazing.
My older brother, who read the book too, which is the only book he's ever read in his entire life, and he's so all into how many copies have you sold? And I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And when you said that, that was the first thing I thought of. That doesn't matter to me.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter if it's 100 or if it's 10,000. It honestly doesn't matter. It's the comments that come back, but it's also that inner strength that I had to pull from to tell those stories, uh, and what that means to my life. That's what's most important.
And let's dive into that. And what was it like? How did you determine which stories you wanted to share? Were there any that you decided to leave out for any reason whatsoever? Did you have to put anything through a filter, or did it just all feel raw?
Yes, there are stories that I left out, and I left them out on purpose. And I talk about in the book that the choices, and consequences chapter, uh, you make choices in the moment that you feel are best. That doesn't mean though it'd be the same choice you would have made now as 59-year-old person as I made as I was a 32-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So some of the stories I left out because I have regrets, and I didn't want to put those out there. Now there are stories of regrets in there, especially in the motherhood chapter, which I think we could all relate to.
Yes.
If you have a child, there's regret. My mother still, and we're adults and almost 60, and she's like, "Oh, I just should have done this better." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, we're fine." So I would say yes, there are some stories that I left out.
Yeah. How did
Um,
you filter that then?
there's so many stories, right? There's so many things that I could pull from raising 8 children, being married 3 times, having a 32-year career with the same company, moving from state to state. So there was so many things to pull from that I didn't think it was necessary to throw those out there. I think there was enough experiences that I could use those.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I will say, and I'm pretty sure it was you, I was writing a chapter, and I'm pretty sure it was on choices, and I was telling a story that involved one of my children, and I literally had a panic attack, like a full anxiety attack. It wasn't just a kind of I was shaking, palms sweating, mouth dry, heart palp. It was awful. And I remember texting you and saying, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this. I know how it turns out. This was years ago. But bringing those raw feelings back out and writing them out, knowing that people are going to read them and they're really going to know and understand who I am at this point, uh, was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. But again, go back to the original mission. I
Yes.
want to share my experience, my strength, my hope with other professional women who are also mothers, right? So you have to share some of those things.
Agreed. And how has that been? I mean, it's easy now to reflect back on how that was in the beginning of writing it. Now looking back, knowing people are reading those, do those feelings still come up at all for you in different periods, or have you just come to terms?
No, I think it was very therapeutic. And somebody will say, I can't believe how our lives aligned.
Mm.
And it's not so much that they aligned, but we all go through the same things, especially as professional women who are raising children. We all feel that we're not adequate. We all have that one teenager that's going to make us crazy. So I think that everybody has those experiences, but now they can say, wait, I'm not alone. Uh, Somebody else had this experience. Somebody else went through what I'm going through, and she survived. She did it. So I think that it's been very therapeutic. And I will admit that people will bring up certain things in the book, and I'm like, geez, I got to go back and read that again. Because
Isn't that crazy?
what?
You're like, I wrote this though.
I did. Yeah. My first public speaking after the book was out, one of my daughter-in-laws said, um, are you going to practice? Or are you going to write down your responses? I go, it's my life. I don't think there's any wrong answer.
speaking of, your writing technique is pretty interesting in today's standards, I should say, in today's practices. And so, how did you write this book, Nita?
I hand wrote the entire manuscript. I know. I knew where you were going when you started saying that. I actually carry the manuscript with me.
Mm.
This is it. Uh, it's my
Mm.
my whoopee.
Oh,
I take it with me at my speaking engagements. Carry it with me when I travel. Uh, but it to me, the stories were so personal, and the experiences and the lessons were so personal that handwriting it, actually cursive handwriting the book, the manuscript, felt like it was from my heart and it was a hug. Um, and even I can tell you when I went to type it all up, I thought, is there a way we can just do it in handwriting? Which of course you can. Um, but it was important for me to have all the feels going in as I was writing.
I think it's a story that I always share because it is unique. And like I said, today's standards. But I love that you carry the notebook with you everywhere like that. I didn't realize
Yes.
that. What would you say is one of those things that you feel like you've learned as a result of the writing process in itself?
Boy, there's a lot to it. I remember sending you the manuscript, and we had the title, and I typed the manuscript and I sent it to you, and I'm like, okay, I'm done.
It's
No.
only just begun, Nita.
And right. And I remember uh, feeling overwhelmed. And again, I was going through cancer treatments as well, and that was a little much. But it was, you guys were so patient and so wonderful. Uh, but there's just more to it. There's more to telling your story. It's hard to start, it's hard to end the story, and it's hard to have people go in and read it and edit it and chop it up and want more information. And but again, all of those things, and Allison was just absolutely amazing with, she's a thesaurus. She would come back and use different words because I say great too much, or do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so just the whole process was so much more than I ever thought it would be. So much more rewarding. Uh, I would say that author um, is probably one of my favorite professional titles.
That's huge. And what does that mean then, being integrated in your life now? It's crazy to think just 1 year ago you weren't one and now you are. What does that mean now for your life today and moving forward with everything that you want to be able to achieve?
It's it's funny because I haven't decided that yet. I don't say no. I'm a big I have a huge faith. And so I keep saying, "Okay, God, I look forward to my next purpose after 32 years, and my children are all adults, and uh, I'm retired from that business. And so I wrote this book, and so I look forward to my next purpose." And he puts things in my path. And as an example, I don't think that any of the speaking engagements I have done was something that I went to someone and said, "Hey, I wrote this book." It's been people saying, "Hey, I heard you wrote this book, and I'd like you to come speak to my group. We'd like you to be a keynote speaker at our kickoff." So I'm not saying no to anything. Uh, and something else will come up. You literally are my last thing on my calendar for the book. But what's so fun about that is before you were the next thing, the last speaking one was the last thing, and then you called. And so I just have to let God direct that path. I know that uh, I'm really enjoying my freedom from the work world. It's been 2 years.
Yeah.
I travel a lot. I have some really great plans coming up with my grandchildren, especially my older three granddaughters who, again, I was the working grandma, so they didn't get as much attention as the ones do now. And so I'm planning to take them up to Paris this year.
Oh,
So it's things like that to me that I feel are more of a purpose to me right now than waving flags and saying, "Hey, I wrote a book and I can speak at your conference." But again, it's his will, not mine.
I'm gonna ask 'cause I'm just curious. You said that for years people were telling you to write a book. What do you feel like, I mean, outside of retirement and having that time in the space, what do you feel like How would it have been different if you said yes in that moment? I'm going to go ahead and do that versus waiting for when you did, especially in relation to your faith and God guiding everything.
There was no way I could have taken the time. I didn't have time. And I appreciated that people thought that I was inspiring and that I was a good leader and that they felt it was something that I could do. I appreciated those things and it planted the seed for sure. But telling my story, writing this book was big, a huge, I say all the time, dream bigger. This was a dream bigger goal. And it deserved its own time and space in my life. And it wouldn't have had its own time and space in my life. It would have been one more thing I had to get through. And I didn't want it to be that.
Mm. You said the timing just worked out well too, and you listened to it when you needed to and took the time when you needed to towards it. What would you say is the you had to give like one piece of advice or one bit of wisdom to people who know that they have a powerful story that they want to share and they're hesitating for whatever reason, especially with your path? What would you tell them?
Somebody else is having that struggle, the same struggle you are, that you went through, that you want to write about, that you want to share. Help them by telling your story. That's what I would say.
Goosebumps down my arms, Nita. Nita, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people follow along with your journey and see what you're up to?
You can continue to walk with Nita, which is how we market the whole program on my website, nitakennedy.com. I would love to have people just go in and look at the photography. It's not protected. What is that? The watermark thing or the...
Yeah.
I didn't take the picture. I don't care. I feel like that is a purpose and that I want to share. And so I do a newsletter once a month that can be on random topics, just continuing to share my story and my travels. So by all means, please come walk with me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Soul Writer Podcast. I hope today's conversation has ignited a newfound passion and determination in you to write from a place of vulnerability, authenticity, and soul. Remember, your story has the power to make a significant impact in the world. And by sharing your unique voice, you're contributing to the tapestry of human experience. So go forth, embrace your soul-driven purpose, and let your words transform the lives of your readers. Be sure to subscribe to the Soul Writer Podcast so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes, where we'll continue to share valuable insights and inspiring stories from fellow authors. You can also join our community on social media to connect with like-minded writers and share your own journey by looking at Burning Soul Collective. Until next time, keep shining your light, and remember, your story matters. Your words have power, and the world needs the magic that only you can create. This is the Soul Rider Podcast, signing off for now. Right on, my friends.